whatever happens, we will push as hard as we can. Our drivers will push as hard as we can because we want to get back to winning. First question, great result in Canada. Really nice to sort of see a bit more pace from the car. But when can we expect the sort of improvements that will get Mercedes racing back at the front? Well, I think firstly, the race team executed really well this weekend. They brought the most we could get from our car in 3rd and 4th place. But I think as a team, we're realistic with ourselves. I think clearly Leclerc wasn't there, Perez wasn't there, and we were sort of not gifted that place because we deserved it, but we would have finished 5th and 6th if they'd have been in the running. From my point of view, what's really nice is to see a bit more pace from the car on Sunday. Also, to find some direction. I think we're starting to understand some of our issues. We're starting to make strides forward. But we're very realistic. We've got our feet properly on the ground and we know we've got to work really hard from here. We've got to turn that into parts that we can bring to make the car go quicker, and we'll try and do that as quickly as we can. Lewis was matching the pace of the top 2 towards the end of the race, but in the final laps, his pace sort of dropped back. Was that due to tyre degradation? I think it's really encouraging to see Lewis sort of be able to tag onto the back of the front 2. I think we looked like we were in decent shape with degradation with the tyres. At that point of the race, I think it was pretty clear to Lewis that barring some sort of collision up front, we didn't quite have the pace to compete and get ourselves into that fight. And he will have sensibly brought the car home in the position it was in. I think if you actually look at the laps towards the end, what you'll see is, although he backed off for a few laps, he then set a pretty quick lap on the penultimate lap. So the pace was there in the car, but not enough pace to challenge for the win, unfortunately. The car seemed to perform better in the race in qualifying. Do we understand that? And what can we do about it? Well, I think it's fair to say that you're always trading between qualifying and race performance. And if you sort of look at what's important, then generally race performance wins. And you can see if you look at some of the cars we're competing against, some of the cars that beat us in qualifying this weekend, you'll see that their race pace is poorer. And I think that's just a trade you make rather than something that there is to underlying fix. You know, we could probably take steps to improve the qualifying performance, but we probably hurt the race performance as a result of that. And we think we've got our balance roughly in the right place for the car we've got at the moment. Was it George's call to go to slicks for Q3, or was it the team's call? Well, to be honest, it was George's call. George had been saying all the way through qualifying that the track was going to move progressively towards slicks. And while we thought that was really surprising early on, you could start to see a dry line emerging, particularly in Sector 2 and Sector 3. And normally in these situations, it's the drivers you ask, because the drivers have got a feel for the car. That was George's opportunity to potentially compete for pole position. And while the risk didn't pay off, it was still a nice thing to do. It's still part of motor racing, and actually we really enjoyed that. Why did George pit straight after Lewis when George's tyres were much younger? I think if you look at the situation of the race at that moment, we were on for a 3rd and 4th, and probably not a lot we could do from there that was going to change that. What we could see up front though is we could see that Sainz was potentially going to try a 1-stop. And looking at that potential 1-stop, we could see that if he dropped off the tyre curve at the end, then Lewis had an opportunity to beat him for the race win. And potentially also George. But in George's case, that was always going to be much more of a struggle. And so the earlier we pitted him, the better chance he had of achieving that strategy. And our gamble at that point, given we had nothing to lose, was that Sainz would try and go for the win, that he would try and hold out on the 1-stop and try and beat Max Verstappen, who was on the 2. And if he fell off the tyre curve at the end, he'd get overtaken by Max, and then potentially our drivers could also interact and potentially overtake. And that could have been a double podium for us. So that's the reason. There was just nothing to lose, and it was a gamble that we took. Why did we have a strategy to run the 2 cars on different wing levels? Well, to explain that, you have to go back to P3, to that practice session in the rain. Both drivers elected to run more wing on the car than was optimal for a dry condition, and the logic behind that was just to get a feel for the car with a bit more grip. Put the car in a situation where that extra grip would help prevent any accidents, because it's very, very difficult to sort of change the car if you've damaged it between P3 and qualifying. As it happens, we've got 2 brilliant drivers who all year have kept the car out of the wall, all year have looked after the car and kept it in the best state possible. So going into qualifying, Lewis elected to go back on that rear wing level to run something that was more optimal for a dry race. George, meanwhile, felt that after P3 he was much happier with the car. He felt that that was a rear wing level he could take into a wet qualifying, and that would get him a bit further up the grid. And if it meant that in the race it was going to hinder him in terms of being able to overtake or potentially being overtaken, he would take that risk. And this is a decision that the race engineers make with the drivers. We discuss it, we work out whether that solution is going to work for us, what the pros and the cons are. And it was just a different decision between the two crews and the two drivers. And that's how we ended up running. Why did we not pit under the safety car for a new soft tyre? Well, the easy answer to that one is that we'd seen all through the weekend that the degradation on the soft tyre was quite high. If we'd only been 2 or 3 laps from the end, we would have fitted the soft. That might have been the right strategy. As it happens, in this case, we knew that the degradation would be such that we'd be vulnerable at the end of the race. And without a new hard tyre or a new medium tyre to fit, the right strategy was just to stay out under the safety car. And actually, that's what most teams elected to do. Well done, team. Great result. But what can we expect in Silverstone, and can we compete for the win? Well, one thing you can be sure of is we'll push as hard as we can. We'll be bringing new bits to Silverstone. We'll be trying to push the car forward, trying to get some pace from the car we've got or from the package we've got, as well as the new bits we're going to add to it. I think at the same time, though, we have to be honest with ourselves and say that at the moment we're just a little bit behind those front runners in Ferrari and Red Bull. And in a normal race, I think it's going to be tough. I think Silverstone will be a circuit that suits us a little bit better, like Barcelona did. But maybe they're just going to be a little bit difficult. But whatever happens, we will push as hard as we can. Our drivers will push as hard as we can because we want to get back to winning. We want to win for the team. We definitely want to win, and we want to win for you, the fans. So let's see what happens. Thank you for all your questions. Once again, you've shown huge insight into our sport and show you as the fans have quite a lot of knowledge of what we do. We'll be back again in 2 weeks' time after the British Grand Prix at Silverstone to answer more of your questions.